I think I'm just going to try and do the same way. I'm going to try and stay out of the way, but if anyone has questions during the middle of it, you can either type them in the chat. If you just want to put your hand up or like type like a 1 in the chat. I'll try and call on you. But other than that, I guess we'll kick it off. So we have Steve Shatters coming online first, and he'll give a little talk about whatever he wants to talk about, and I'll help facilitate other questions, or you can just take them from the chat, Steve. And so first of all, congrats on Terranode, and then you can take it away.
Thank you. Look, I must admit I am a little bit unprepared for this because had Brendan not sent me a message and reminded me this was happening, I probably would have not been here, but I kind of forgot. It's been one hell of a 5 or 6 days since Thursday. Our office has been flat out. We've had people working 18-hour days. We've typically not been getting home until 6 a.m. I've actually been living out of a hotel near the office so that I can save an hour or two of commuting. But things are pretty much where we expected them to be. Everything that's happened is kind of what we predicted. And I think that the ABC side is starting to feel the pain. I think maybe they just thought we were bluffing and that we wouldn't sustain our hash for this long. But well, not only have we sustained it for this long, we have every intention of continuing for as long as it takes. We have a new page popping up on the Bitcoin SV website, hopefully later tonight. And if you want a real picture of how this is all panned out, that page is going to probably lift your spirits quite a lot. It's a page that has a compilation of all the logos of companies that have decided to support Bitcoin SV exclusively. It's a much bigger list than I actually thought it was.
So yeah, we've only managed to get companies and businesses and people who want to use Bitcoin, not the gamblers.
Exactly. If you look at that list, what you're going to see is a whole lot of serious businesses that have serious business plans that are serious about making Bitcoin Cash a real and viable global currency. So I'm really quite happy with where we're at right now. Thanks for the congratulations on the Terranode. Terranode is a project that we really had kind of a long-term plan for. We had to build some additional tools to fortify our nodes for the conditions that we were kind of expecting on the network, we kind of did it without realizing it. But only a couple of days before the fork, I looked at what we built and I went, hang on, this looks a lot like the architecture of Terranode. So we've just got some services that normally are part of the monolithic Bitcoin D, and we found ways to kind of extract them out, and that allows us to get around the single-threaded nature of Bitcoin D, let it do the important stuff. And we can offload a lot of that work to other things. So the first iteration of it is it's quite primitive, but it does the job. And we're working on adding additional features and farming more and more of the services off to external processors, which means that those external processors don't suffer from the same problems that the Bitcoin D does. They can be completely multi-threaded. We can take advantage of the massive machines with plenty of CPU cores that we've got running our mining nodes. I think what you can expect to see over the next week, month, whatever, is just a series of bigger and bigger blocks. I won't try and predict a schedule for you right now, but yeah, I'm really happy with the progress. I'm really happy with our team. We've uncovered some absolute star performers, yeah, I guess that's it. I'm really quite happy with everything right now. I know the other side are probably thinking we should be quaking in our boots and they've got some exchanges on site, and it's all over and done with. But it was pretty much a guarantee that there was going to be a propaganda war after the first couple of days, because I think the other side really did need a quick and decisive victory. Otherwise, they knew that it was going to drag out into a war of attrition. And that's not where their strength lies. So anyway, we're happy to just go off on our own and build our own ecosystem. We've got a large majority of the ecosystem, and when I say majority, I don't mean the sheer, the raw numbers of exchanges and services and whatever that support us. I mean the ones that actually have serious business plans behind them. We're not by no means if we strike out on our own and build from scratch, we're not beginning from nothing at all. We're beginning with a very, very strong ecosystem, and I think the future is very bright for Bitcoin Cash. One thing that is important to note, I think, is that what the Bitcoin SV supporting miners have done, and this isn't just CoinGeek and BMG. This is others who are not part of not as closely related or as friendly to us as CoinGeek and BMG is that they have preserved the Bitcoin blockchain. Once DSV and CTOR entered into the picture, and probably more particularly CSV, the blockchain was contaminated, and this is probably part of the reason why Bitcoin Cash fork happened in the first place, because it basically prevented SegWit from ever getting in there. We knew there was another plan to make sure that SegWit never got in, but that plan was sort of went a little bit awry thanks to Jihan. But we at least now still have a version of Bitcoin that is the original Bitcoin that is uncontaminated. And can I just say that what Bitcoin ABC did overnight with their new release and their 10-block checkpoint protection, etc. I was interviewed by CoinDesk just a couple of hours ago, and they asked me what I thought that meant for ABC. What it means for ABC is that they're not Bitcoin anymore. They have abandoned Nakamoto consensus. If they think that they need to build in protections into the software to protect themselves from a 10-block reorg, what they are effectively saying is that they have no confidence in their miners to provide security for the network. We will never introduce a change like that. We will trust our miners to keep Bitcoin secure. And
it's actually more fun. You can actually start mining separate chains. So you mine 8, and then you stop, and you mine as they're going back to try and undo your reorg. You mine again, and you start splitting, and you can actually have 10 different chains simultaneously going. And it makes a big, massive mess. It's actually massively fun. Where are we? Doesn't want to draw. Anyway, won't show up there on this thing properly, but you can start one chain, then go back and rejoin the one that's lost so that it keeps going, and all this sort of stuff. And the only way they start doing it is issuing checkpoints on the fly against all their nodes, and then it's Ripple. So you replace Bitcoin with Ripple and start pushing out consensus updates as you're going, and vote on which block is the real block.
Exactly. The very next step for them, if they want to continue in this direction, is to put all of the transactions into a MySQL database and make a decision about who gets to decide which transactions are.
I disagree. I think Oracle would be better.
But it's got to be free and open source, Craig. If it's not open source, it doesn't count.
Yeah, but MySQL's owned by Oracle anyway.
Just because they've made a 10-block one public, they could have distributed an 8 one to their miners or a 7 one. Who knows?
Exactly.
Yeah. I also confirmed today, I spoke with some of the other developer groups. This decision was not made with any consultation with the other implementation teams. It was a unilateral decision made by Armory and possibly Jihan and Roger. I don't know if they were in the loop or not. So this is the new model for Bitcoin ABC chains governance. Armory will decide what happens, and BU will bend over and take it. It's a shame because I really like some of the people at BU. I mean, there's some that are dickheads, but there are probably a lot more good people in BU than there are dickheads. Yeah, this is the new paradigm and the new reality for them, unfortunately. Anyway, enough from me. I think I'm not quite sure what the format of this is supposed to be, but I'll shut up now, and if people have got questions, I'm happy to answer.
I guess I'll ask one question, but if anyone does want to ask questions, they can either raise their hand in the chat and ask it over video, or they can ask in the chat. But my general question is, if they are going to move to this unilateral, ABC pushes a change and the exchanges just take it, does that help them with their end goal of having a chain split at all, or does it hurt them?
Does it help them with what, sorry?
Achieving a chain split in perpetuity, because that's their end goal is to achieve a chain split without actually putting in replay protection. And I guess that's my question is, if they're going to keep pushing in software changes and it'll be accepted at will, can they just soft fork in replay protection, for example? And
I mean, I think eventually they will put replay protection in. Does it help them mimic replay protection? Well, I mean, you kind of don't need to. There's other ways that you can sort of split coins, etc. So, but yeah, I mean, it definitely sets a serious precedent. If the exchanges are all just following what ABC does, then there is no such thing as decentralized governance in the ABC chain anymore. I mean, it's honestly always has been that way, because pretty much what ABC said was what happened. Fortunately, we managed to convince them in May to put the re-enable old opcodes and not to put any other dumb shit in. But essentially, in May, it was what Bitcoin what Armory decided was what and that appears to still be the case. I think I've said before that there were a couple of different votes on CTOR, and it was overwhelmingly rejected. One of them was public, one was probably not so well known. And ABC just went ahead and did it anyway. So, yeah.
More interestingly, most people will probably find this boring, but in just the last few weeks, there's been a case handed down from the European Court of Justice that I've been waiting for. Now, it's actually to do with cartel law. Now, the reason for that is parties outside the cartel doing actions that impact the cartel that they act on allow the cartel to be held liable. Now, simply the way that this has actually been enacted with the centralized forcing of running of certain code options effectively makes it a cartel operation. And under law, with the European law now that has been passed, which means all of Europe, and because we haven't left with Brexit, the UK, any miner doing something like even if you don't split, you're now liable. So anything happens, if you're building on top of a block that has DSV or an illegal ICO, or you do anything now, that is a known action. You can easily tell it's there. You're not a common carrier, and anyone who sues you doesn't need to sue the ICO. They can sue the miner. Gotta love the Europeans.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I don't think we have any other questions, but if anyone thinks of any, you can ask them. That sounds like bitfire.io.
Yeah, sorry, that's me.
That's all right. I've been hearing it all week. So we'll move on to James Belding, who works for the tokenized.cash team. Probably no dot in there when you pronounce it. So James, you can take it away.
Thanks, Connor. Hi, everyone. So I'm James, the CEO and co-founder of Tokenized and the architect of the protocol. So we also have a few other members in our team. I'm not sure if Spunky, Sam's online yet. We also got Brendan. We got a couple of guys that I'll introduce at the CoinGeek conference. So interesting times. Personally, from the hash war perspective, I think our entire team remains resolute and completely confident in SV. This is not something that we've really had to think too much about. Like from even as far back as 6 to 8 months ago, we realized that N-Chain, CoinGeek, these guys know what they're doing, and the brain trust on that side is significantly better than the other side, in my opinion. The vision's better, the technical expertise is better, the execution's better, and we just like it better. We know that that's where things will end up going, and we're very, very confident that we've made the right choice. So it was not even a matter of thinking for us. It was just, yep, we're on board. We're going with you guys. So I think it's very exciting. It's nice to break free from all that crap, in my opinion. As much as there's a sort of a negative effect in the, it sort of sends a message out to the market that there's a bit of instability and we've lost a little bit of network effect. I think this is just something that's going to happen. And I don't think this is the last time this will happen. I think to get to a global currency, there's going to be blood. There's going to be a few other bodies to fall, unfortunately. And this is just the beginning. So we're going to have to stomach it and recognize that this is part of the process. And yeah, we're working for global money. We're not working for some Mickey Mouse little project, right? So this is serious stuff. But yeah.
We're not letting it happen again.
Nah, well, I hope not.
It'll happen again.
If you want to do it again,
but it's definitely
cause you lots of pain. Like everyone's going to just have to keep understanding. Every time you do this, we keep causing you pain.
It's a good message to send. Yeah, no, and one thing I think is really important is that this is going to be, to me, it's like a very much an evolutionary process, and the winners of this hash battle are going to gain significant strength. So the victor go the spoils, and that strength is going to carry on to eventually taking out BTC and becoming the dominant coin, which I think is a really important part of the process. So this is how these things work. But yeah, so that's just my spin and my thoughts on the hash war. Tokenized, the tokenized protocol. I don't know how many people had a chance to look at it, but I could give a quick little overview about what we're hoping to achieve and sort of how we've done it. So when I started getting really interested and seriously interested in Bitcoin back last year in November, when I sort of decided that the time was right, that the technology is mature enough and that people had understood it properly, that the trajectory was correct, I started seriously studying technology and seriously studying all the details and figuring out how I can make a contribution. Tokens were always something that were very important to me, and it's just sort of a natural thing that was going to develop and something that had huge potential over what was currently available. So I started thinking about it in November, and I started developing a business that I thought would take advantage of that. And I fleshed the whole business model out, and I thought I had great potential, but just no token system had been developed. So I was waiting and waiting and waiting, hoping that a token system would be developed by someone, and it sort of just didn't happen. And even when the CoinGeek contest was announced, I didn't even flinch. I didn't even think that I would be entering it. I didn't think that that was something that was worth my time at the time. But as the months passed, I think it was another month or two after it had been announced, and I realized I didn't think anything was happening. I've been probing the community, asking if anyone was working on it. I didn't see any interest in it even. Like a lot of people, when I talk about tokens, just not interested, flat out, didn't want to talk about it. So I just started chipping away at a design that I had in the back of my mind. And when I saw Johannes's paper and saw the Tokita, that basic action mechanism that he describes, the whole thing just like crystallized in my head. And I just went on a fury of like 2-3 days and like just hashed the whole thing out and felt really good about it. Like intuitively and logically, everything just felt so right. And it suited my business goals. It suited what I thought real businesses wanted to use and what real customers wanted to use. And so I'm not a developer. I'm just an electrical engineer, and I needed to get some help to help me code it up and get a content entry together. So I recruited Sam, Sweet Spunky on BCH chat, and recruited Brendan and Scott and a few other guys, and we just started smashing it full time basically, and got an entry in, and the rest of you guys have sort of heard about now. So yeah, it's a great honor to be awarded it, and we are driving just as hard as we have been this last few months to bring like a real commercial platform, a real solution that every business could benefit from. So that's very much our goal, is we want this to be a global standard, something that the entire world can use and benefit from. And I personally believe it's going to be the first serious use case that the mainstream audience or mainstream masses can actually use. And my argument there is that I don't believe big serious companies can get involved and use Bitcoin as their main currency until the price stabilizes out a bit. But they can use the ledger component of it and have Bitcoin facilitate their interactions with the ledger without worrying about the volatility. So to me, it sort of drives utility and drives the use cases onto the blockchain, and then the actual cash use case, which has to be the foundational feature for this all to work. But I think uses of money in the mainstream masses, I think will start to take hold a little bit later, to sort of follow that afterwards. As far as the token protocol and the system, it basically just works where you have an off-chain agent, which we've called a smart contract. And I think that's a very fair call. I don't think that's trying to hijack anything. And I sort of really studied what smart contracts mean and thought about it on a philosophical level and got to the root of it when it was first defined and what the aim of it was. And I feel very confident that this whole Ethereum sort of direction they've taken with smart contracts and the branding behind it is just silly. I don't think that's ever what it was meant to be. And I don't think it adds any value. And I also think calling locking scripts within a transaction a smart contract is, I do think there's merit to it, but I think it's in combination with other things, because just having a locking script is not particularly smart in my view, because you still need someone to rebroadcast that transaction over and over again if the conditions haven't been met. So to me, the smart contract concept is a bit broader than that. It involves locking scripts and it involves off-chain agents, the combination of the two. And effectively, that brings serious utility and expressiveness, even to a much higher degree than what Ethereum can do with their ERC20 platform. And also in light of where Ethereum's going with their current upgradable smart contracts and the backdoors and all that, which is just turning into a complete joke. They've just lost the plot, in my opinion. So this is where things will go, in my opinion. And I think it's ready for global adoption. Like I said before, I think it brings all the value that was promised and at the cheapest possible cost. Yeah, so that's sort of a little brief overview without getting too technical and all that. Anyone got any questions? Anything they want me to expand upon? Brendan, maybe if you want to jump in, if you want to say some stuff, or Sam?
It's not so much a question, just more something to add to it. So one of my team, I was asked by CoinGeek to provide some technical review for some of the entries, and I had one of our architects look at it, and the tokenized solution stood out like a sore thumb from the range of entries that we had. There were some really, really neat technical solutions. But tokenized just started right from the beginning with a focus on business and said, okay, what is it that business wants? They tried to deliver a business-oriented solution, and they did that incredibly well. I've read through the spec, and it's one of the most thorough pieces of technical specification that I've seen in a long time. And I think that tokenized is going to be one of the key platforms, not the only one, but one of the key platforms that's going to drive Bitcoin into the future, because at Enchain we have a consulting services division which is just ramping up, but the reason why we have it is because we're constantly getting asked by people in industry, can you help us with this, can you help us with that? And one thing that we've been asked repeatedly over the last year is, can you help us tokenize something, whether it be a currency, whether it be a stock market, whether it be any number of other things.
More in a manner that is legally recognized.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a really good point. Every single one that has come to us has said we want something that's actually going to fit in the regulatory space. We don't want to be some crypto anarchist that's going to pick a fight with the US government. We actually just want to be able to operate a business in normal regulatory inside the normal regulatory frameworks. And all along, we've had to tell them that's a great idea, and we want to help you, but we don't actually. There's not a functioning token solution on Bitcoin Cash blockchain yet that we can comfortably recommend to you, and that's all changed now that tokenized exists. So there's a queue of really, really big businesses that are basically just waiting for tokenized to come out, and they're all going to start building. And I think the pace of momentum, the momentum is going to probably stagger a few people when they realize what's coming to the Bitcoin Cash blockchain as a result of tokenized.
Yeah, I guess so. From my perspective, when I first met James, he had come up with the idea that was kind of the precursor to tokenized, which he had called Bit Equity, which was based on a talk that Craig had given kind of back in February or something like that, which was a way of owning a home and being able to tokenize the equity in that home and sell that to people and rent it back and all this kind of stuff. And when he'd shown me that, I read it and I was like, holy crap, he's really done everything. Like it was ready to go. And he asked me to look at it. I said, man, this is great. And then about probably a month later, he came back and said, actually, I've changed focus. I want to go for the CoinGeek contest, and I've come up with something that's much more broad and would be able to do what I originally wanted to do with Bit Equity, but many other things as well. And when he presented that to me, it really was quite complete in the way it had been put together. And the one thing that I was really drawn to, after hanging around in the Slack and listening to Craig a lot and other people about, legal issues around how cryptocurrency was being handled, the strong focus of the white paper was making things work within the law and making companies able to manage and control their tokens in a way that was compliant with whatever regulatory set they were exposed to, anywhere in the world. And I think that for the whole tokenized team, I don't want to speak for the whole tokenized team, but certainly for myself, that just said that this is something that can be adopted anywhere. I think we all agreed from the very beginning that was the right approach. This kind of permissionless stuff that everyone keeps chasing, it's really not something that I feel is going to be able to be widely deployed, because governments and enforcement agencies aren't going to tolerate.
It's not even governments; it's people. I mean, if you want to give your money to an investment, it's got to be a safe investment.
Yeah.
You can't take, all these people are sitting there going, institutional investors are going to give us money. Institutional investors don't give money to people off the street randomly selling you bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was one key point. Sorry, Brennan.
Right.
That I thought was really important. That kind of really is the tipping point in my thinking a long time ago when I started to develop this, was that even if you had a totally decentralized, like bearer share style ERC20 token, to actually get people to invest in it, the people who are investing have to know what they're investing in. You can't invest in an anonymous company with anonymous directors and anonymous cash flow, and you don't know what you're investing in, right? You need to know what you're investing in. Otherwise, people just won't do it. So the moment that company identifies itself publicly and associates itself with that token, it doesn't matter how decentralized it is, the government now knows who to go target. So if they're breaking or acting unlawfully or breaking the law, they can just go grab the directors, throw them in jail, end of story. And you've got these decentralized tokens that mean absolutely nothing. So that was a pretty key bit of logic that I think holds the whole thing together.
Yeah, the whole thing around tokens is that the value of a token exists off the blockchain. And while what you are trading is being managed by the blockchain, that actual the equity that's being moved around is something external to that, and it's nothing like Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin is completely separate from tokens, and there's a lot of people out there who are trying to create token systems and token products that have the properties of Bitcoin, and it's just not something that I think as a business
you can't do it for physical goods.
Yeah, you can't.
The reality is a court needs to be able to transfer the goods or it's not going to be valid. Because if you have a car and you sell it and someone then complains or whatever else, you can't go, ha ha. It doesn't work that way. This is the real world.
100%.
It's something, this whole permissioned versus permissionless tokens is an interesting debate, and it all crystallized in my head after 6 months. Literally, it took 6 months of debating about op-group before I really understood. There was always something about it that smelled, and I just wasn't comfortable with it, which is why I was not willing to throw any support behind op-group. But what I eventually came to understand was, as Brendan just said, tokenizing assets that exist outside of the blockchain is one thing. To argue that a token can have intrinsic value that is born inside the blockchain is another thing. And when you have a token that has no value outside of the blockchain other than its utility, there's actually another word for it. It's a cryptocurrency. So what our group was proposing to do was to create multiple cryptocurrencies on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that was dangerous for a very important reason. Because the consensus rules of Bitcoin do not dictate that you have to pay a minor fee in Bitcoin. In fact, they don't dictate that you have to pay a minor fee at all. Once you have op group, you have first-class equal citizens with Bitcoin in the form of all of these alternate tokens. They have no disadvantage because you don't need a larger transaction to transact them. You can transact them in exactly the same way as you can transact Bitcoin. That means that it's now possible for anyone to just create a new group token and effectively mint more Bitcoins. It's very, very feasible that at some point in the future, one of these group tokens, which may have a completely different inflationary policy, becomes more valuable than Bitcoin, and miners start saying, you know what, don't pay me your transaction fees in Bitcoin anymore, pay them to me in this group token. And once that happens, then the whole Bitcoin experiment is dead, because the core proposition of Bitcoin was not about decentralization or consensus or Bitcoin nodes or whatever. It was about fixed money supply, and that is what permissionless, so-called permissionless tokens put at risk.
Yeah, there's one other thing too. I actually really don't like that whole dichotomy that's developed between permissionless and permissioned. It isn't representative of what we're really talking about here. What my system can allow for is any entity in the world to be able to issue tokens permissionlessly and have anyone else participate in that. They don't need a government's permission. They don't have any authorities overseeing that. They oversee their own token or their own tokens and their own contracts. So if someone wanted to disobey a government's policies or rules, they could do that, and they could rent a server in a different country with favorable regulations, and they could pay that in Bitcoin Cash, and you couldn't stop it, right? Obviously, they'd be doing it at their own risk, and there's probably not too many use cases where people would want to do it, but it does allow for that. So it's only really
ways government could stop it with orders and all the rest, but I mean, don't ever say government can't stop it. I mean,
true. Well, there's
I've been involved with government things for too long. They'll stop it.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's very offensive to them, they will for sure. And there's always ways. And like even like the offshore banking, the last few years has really highlighted how long the reach of the American government is.
Yep.
Power works, right? It gets things done. So, but it is. I think that to me, the whole permissionless falls on its head though with that, because you can still do what they ask to do if the issuer wants to. If the issuer wants to issue a bearer share and they want to go to a jurisdiction that allows for bearer shares, great, they can do that. And effectively, no one can stop them in that sense, as long as it's legal where they want to do it. So it does satisfy that.
It's important to understand that tokens really just mirror what happens in the real world. If you want to go to St. Kitts and start a stock exchange and start issuing securities, sure, you can. But you're just mirroring what a so-called permissions token is doing. And if the US government wants to come and intervene and cross borders, then they will. Yeah.
There's one other example too. I just thought while we're on the topic that I thought was really telling was the real estate example, and this kind of like echoes what Craig was saying when it comes to real goods. I always imagined that the Empire State Building, if we could tokenize that and had a bunch of owners, let's say it was fractionalized and you had 5 or 6 shareholders, what would happen if they were to lose their keys, their private keys? You know, does that bit of land effectively just get wiped off the map, that no one can ever own it again, that it can never be sold?
Yes.
I think that's just
the building would have to disappear.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd have to go on the maps and edit it. You can no longer see it on Google Maps. So I thought that part was just crazy to think that that was something people wanted to have. And what would happen is the government would have, if they even decided to use the Bitcoin ledger as something meaningful in a legal sense, then they just have a separate ledger next to it, which would make note of all the screw ups. So they lost private keys. So now we've got a separate ledger over here to patch that one over, right? And the whole thing would become a waste of time. So if we want this ledger to be respected by authorities and to be the source of truth, you have to have authorities on board, the ones that recognize property rights and enforce property rights. Otherwise, it's just,
what happens when people who have a dual ownership of property have a conflict? So you get divorced. Then 2 people have got keys. How do you split it up? Courts get involved. And one guy loses and has to sell, and it's a 2 of 2 contract, and the wife sits there going, I'm going to sell. And he goes, I'm not going to. And the court says, you're going to. I'm sorry, you're going to.
That's it. Tokens actually only make sense if they can accurately mirror what it is that they represent in the real physical world. Once that connection, that mirror kind of breaks down, once they get out of sync with each other, then all of a sudden they're useless. So this notion of permissionless tokens is only ever applicable to a cryptocurrency itself, which doesn't have any presence in the real world, in the physical world. Sorry, I forgot what my point was now. Too many late nights.
You were saying that tokens can only actually exist if they work within the law.
If you lose that synchronization between what's in the blockchain and what's in the real world, then the tokens actually just they stop having any meaning.
I think that the ownership model of tokens in the world today, it really needs to mirror the current way that assets are handled. You can't have a situation where all of a sudden the ownership model is completely just desynchronized from legality, and where something can just be kind of hidden or taken away. It's got to be compatible with the way things are done.
Well, that's the thing. People don't seem to realize that when they're going, throw it away, it doesn't work. Well, this anti-capitalist idea is they just say throw it away, but they don't say anything better. Let's all go back to being hunter-gatherers and 99% of the population will die. And I don't care about you. I don't want to live in a grass hut.
I remember what my point was now. So this notion of the permissionless token, quote unquote, it's really just this strange kind of pipe dream of the crypto anarchist community, where they think that you can have this sort of mystical thing in the blockchain that somehow is not representative of what's in the real world, but it still has meaning. I mean, it's quite literally it's an ideal that is not reflective of reality.
It's little kiddies like Stick Boy who actually think that they can make code equal law, and that guys with funny wigs will care.
Yeah, it shows a massive naivete on their part, in my opinion. And I'm still waiting for the next bit of logic when they say, let's take out governments and go into an anarchist world. And how do they deal with property rights? Right now, I've read a lot on the anarchist side of things. I've read libertarian things. Nothing satisfies, in my opinion.
Crypto, what do you call it? Communism. I mean, Vitalik's already talking about that. It's the communism that comes because after singularity happens and the world changes and the computers take over, we're all just going to be equal.
Yep.
Yep. Yay. Not in my fucking watch.
I wouldn't do well in the hunter-gatherer society, so I'm not for that. We can.
I just kill everyone else off.
I haven't chased down a deer in 20 or 30 years, so.
Greg's in favor of the hunter-gatherer society because he wants to eat my guinea pig. He's threatened to do it many, many times.
Yeah, well, I'm ex-military and I have the typical overkill thing. I've still got a farm that I never visit in Australia, and we had a fox problem. And I had some friends still in the military, and we got some Semtex, and we put about 2 kilos of Semtex in the foxhole, which ended up looking like a foxhole because we all ran around dodging rocks for a few minutes as these big rocks fell out of the sky. But yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Yep.
Yeah, the quick tip: if Craig ever invites you over for New Year's Eve at a fireworks show, don't go.
I'm licensed.
Yeah, that doesn't mean
Roger, I have a license
with explosives.
We're gonna run through
my wife because not last year but the year before, we got several ton of fireworks in our backyard, including like big 8-inch mortars. And while I was a little bit drunk, I'm standing with the control thing in the center of all the fireworks. I had to do the Greatest Showman bit and like had this big ring of fireworks around me, standing there with the remote going boom, boom. Which would have been great if I had maybe a bottle of scotch less.
I'm staying home on New Year's Eve, Craig. I'm not coming out to yours.
Let's run through the questions that came in. I guess just open it up for the whole tokenized team here. First question: do you think country governments would use tokenized tokens for their fiat currencies, and would that give them more power with permission transactions?
It's possible. I guess it depends on how fast Bitcoin gets adopted and how slow they are to move. I think there's serious value in it from a tokenized platform point of view. In the early days, like over the next year, couple of years, having a tethered token to a currency makes a lot of sense for shares because that effectively brings in the mainstream masses that don't have to worry about the crypto volatility or the Bitcoin volatility. They can just trade shares and benefit from the extremely low transaction cost, the immutability of the ledger, the ease of issuance, all that. As whether or not governments will get involved in that, I'm sure they'll have a say at some point. I don't know if they'll jump on board. It's It's early to say right now.
We know of two governments that are already keen on crypto, on tokenizing their own national currencies. I'm not at liberty to say who they are right now, but when I mentioned before that there were people waiting in the wings,
that's part of it. There's huge value in it if they do get on board, not only for the Bitcoin ecosystem, but for themselves, because the transaction fees will be ultra low and merchants can just get an iPhone and effectively receive their fiat currency, right? They don't need a point of sale.
Well, more than that, they don't even need to have the keys on that iPhone. You can have a POS system where the guy who's the sales clerk gives you something and can validate it, and the head office gets the payment. So there's no theft or embezzlement or anything in the stores.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, it also helps us. If we get them on board, then we've got the government incentivizing their citizens or pushing their citizens to put wallets on their phones, which is a good thing. And then when they see...
Oh, I think we've lost James there.
Might have lost.
Seems so.
Yep.
I was just going to say it also enables
fiat currency inflating away value each year. Well, I'm be mostly good.
He's back. We lost you there for a second, James. For I don't know what you said in the last 10 seconds.
Oh, that was the best thing I'd said all day. Profound.
Brendan, do you want to make a point there, or we can move to the
I was just saying, implementing these kinds of implementing a fiat currency in crypto just lays out a pathway to enable all kinds of different models for workers being paid. So, I mean, imagine, I don't know about you guys, but I worked for many years in hospitality, and you go in, you work your shifts, and kind of 2 weeks later you get paid. But I mean, imagine being paid when you walk into a restaurant, you sign into the POS system, it knows who you are, it knows that you're there, it knows your hourly rate, and then when you finish your shift, you sign out and you get paid immediately. And there's all these kinds of efficiencies in the system that come about from implementing these currencies as either a token or its own kind of, as a token on top of Bitcoin that you can achieve. And that not just make the business itself more efficient, but really make life easier for the people working in those businesses. And I think that's super exciting to try and think about where that can go and explore that potential. And I think that's one of the things that this is really going to open up, and we're going to see really exciting new models coming out for how to run a business, how to pay workers, how to buy things for the business. So it's really, I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes.
Great. This next question is to James. You described that you always found tokens important. I'm curious about what ideas pushed you in that direction. What caused you to direct your focus towards tokens?
Well, I think the real estate idea that Dr. Wright put forward in that Switzerland talk was a real that really got me thinking about like the ability to fractionalize things to a very, very high degree. And I started thinking about, well, if you could cheaply and efficiently issue literally billions of tokens if you wanted to, you get the per unit price, the per token price down to cents. And if the transaction fee supported that kind of valuation, it wasn't too onerous, then you could effectively open up investing to the whole world, right? So if you're in India and you're only making $200 a month, you can't really afford to buy Google shares at $500, $600 US per share, right? You just can't buy a single one. But if you had shares that were $1 and the transaction fees were 1/10 of a cent, suddenly pretty much everyone can invest if they want to in a proportional amount relative to their net worth. So I thought that was a really important point. I like the equity model better. This is a big complex argument, but just the idea of people owning equity and increasing their net worth through equity rather than through massive debt over 20 years. I think there's a lot of sense in that. And it's reflective of I mean, if you really crunch the numbers and you look at the model of what you can get out of it with all these advantages, kind of what we described, and some other ones I haven't mentioned yet, you can make the cost of owning property, I think, a lot cheaper, and you can realign incentives a lot better with making renters who don't care about the property, they don't care about taking care of it. If there's a problem, they just call someone and they hire a plumber at $80, $90 an hour to come fix a basic problem. Where if you can get them to own things and feel a sense of ownership over it, and you spread that out amongst all the assets, that every asset is owned and managed by someone who effectively feels ownership in it, then the actual maintenance and operating costs and the care that people have with those assets really goes up. And I think that's real. I think that's a real important point to this all. Yeah, and just the convenience, like the immutability, the public nature of it all, just the inherent accountability that comes with the transparency and all that stuff, I think is an improvement. And then just settlement time, right? Like if you really look at how the banking system works and you hear people that work on the inside talk about how the thing is, it's a disaster. It's not what you think it is in terms of the gravitas and the front that banks put up, but how professional and organized they are. It's not that well done. And the settlement times, 2 to 3 days are not that good. We can get that down to an hour-ish, depending on the value and all that. So I think that's a huge improvement as well. And time is important. So hopefully I answered that with a few different points there.
Yeah. This next question I was asked to ignore, but I actually kind of like it, so I'm going to ask it. How will complex transactions aid the fees for miners as we approach the halvening?
So are we talking about like on-chain scripts, like complex strips, or are we talking about off-chain smart contracts?
I guess both.
Yeah. So, I mean, anything that's on-chain, if it's charged per fee or a fee per byte, is, it should satisfy the miners' needs there in that requirement. They'll be more profitable the bigger and more complex the scripts are. Off-chain scripts, what I like about off-chain smart contracts is that we're only putting on the bare minimum onto on-chain, right? So any data that gets stored on-chain is inherently more expensive, right? And you can do all kinds of calculations to figure out how much more, but let's just say it's 1,000 times more expensive. There's certainly value in that, and there's a lot of value, especially when it comes to commercial relationships or agreements, contracts, things like that. But you want to put the bare minimum on that, and anything that doesn't need to have the immutability and all the benefits of the blockchain, why not just have it off-chain? Why not have the processing off-chain? Because it just makes the system more competitive. So if you're going to go up against Ethereum, which I don't think they're having a fighting chance, I don't think we'll have a real proper fight, but let's say you were to go up someone like them or a competitor, you can just outcompete them. You can just be 1,000 times cheaper or more, right? So
it's interesting that you mentioned that, James. I was having a bit of an argument in one of our local blockchain groups in Brisbane, where someone was telling me that Ethereum was so much cheaper and blah, 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 blah. And I just laid out the price of Bitcoin Cash, and it didn't even compare. It was 25 times more expensive to do peer-to-peer token exchange on Ethereum. The only time it was cheaper was when you were issuing a token to kind of 10,000 people at once, that you could do that at a rate that was cheaper than Bitcoin. But as soon as you tried to do peer-to-peer exchange with people, the cost just skyrocketed. And
that's right now when no one's using the network, right? This is like a down period, right? Like the price is going to skyrocket as soon as people start.
As soon as Ethereum, when CryptoKitties came online, and I just find this ludicrous that a game revolving around the trading of digital cats could crush a network so badly. The cost was, not just 25 times more expensive, but like 500 or 1,000 times more expensive.
Yeah.
I read an article, which I think I've talked to you about, James, where the founder of CryptoKitties came out and he actually said, when we looked at it, we realized that the cost of processing a CryptoKitty on the Ethereum network, so using it as a dApp, was 100 million times more expensive than doing the same operations on Amazon Web Services. And as soon as I read that, it was just like, well, this is defunct. It can't work. There's no future in this.
Well, the whole point is, why do you need every person on Earth validating that your cat had a shit? Crypto shit.
or that you change the whiskers from black to grey and back to black again.
Yeah, well, you need everyone to have a node to validate the consensus of crypto shitties. I mean, otherwise you may you may skimp on the litter box or something.
And I just see that entire model as forcing developers to cut every single corner they can to minimize the number of operations that are actually being conducted on chain. And so every dApp that is implemented on these kind of in-chain environments that they've created, these kind of on-chain virtual machines, they have to cut every single corner that they can to minimize the cost to their users. And it's just completely impractical, because as soon as you try to do something that's reasonably complicated, the cost just goes through the roof. Whereas what Bitcoin Cash and tokenized offers is a way to export all of that complicated stuff into like a cloud computing environment, and you can just manage whatever it is that you're trying to do that's much more complicated. And the only time you ever need to come back to the blockchain and pay a fee and do a transaction is when there's a proper decision point or an exchange. And that's the real efficiency here. And I think that's what people can't see is the real benefit. You know, you try to talk to them about it and they just don't understand that what they're trying to do is it's completely inefficient. You know,
they don't care. They're just sitting waiting for the next scam to pump money and get out.
Exactly.
We'll take the last question here. And again, if anyone does have something else they want to jump in on, let me know. But as a follow-up, what are the major bottlenecks to implementing your vision of fractional equity ownership?
Just the legal side of things. I think getting, for a company to go and do that, there'd be a bit of regulatory or legal work necessary to kind of convince regulators of what you're doing and make sure it's all above board and iron out all the details. So there's a few complications in it, but I don't think anything is a problem. I've gone through it in detail. So just a matter of doing the work, putting the money up. There's also sort of like an adoption thing, right? Because it's a paradigm shift. And home ownership is very much, for example, this is one that I think is the greatest use case for it. Home ownership is a very emotional thing, right? People like the idea of owning a home, irrespective of whether the bank actually owns 95% of it or whatever it is. There's an emotional feeling about it, and I think you have to overcome some hangups there.
Great. Let's move on. If you are not muted, you could mute yourself if you're not talking, that'd be great. And then I guess just if we want, Brendan, if you just want to give a very brief update on how the stress test went and what you learned. And
yeah, so the stress test, we've had a lot of challenges with that. So you all probably recall we did like a pre-test a week before the fork, or a week before the main stress test, I should say. So 5 days before the fork, where we actually achieved a very consistent run of 32 megabyte blocks. I think we had four out of 5 in a row. And we were actually able to demonstrate that was tied to the ramp up of what we're calling the Satoshi shotgun. What happened after the fork, I thought was quite remarkable. We actually saw quite a degradation in the performance of the network, and we've been spending several days working around that, and interfacing with people that we know in the community who've been able to connect us to miners and try to route around. But basically what happened when the fork occurred,
Hello?
Nice view.
fractured the network very, very badly. And it meant that when we started to ramp up the transaction rate from the Satoshi shotgun, basically those transactions got stuck in the network and couldn't actually route into the mining nodes in a similar fashion to what they could before the fork. And you know, Ethon, he's here now in London for the CoinGeek conference, but he's been really working around the clock to improve the shotgun and make it much more manageable. And actually, since he's been here today, he's been teaching me how to use the system. And what we're trying to do over the next few days, one of the things that we really feel is necessary to deliver is conclusive evidence that the Bitcoin SV network is able to scale. And to demonstrate that, what we're trying to achieve is a consistent run of large blocks. And we know that we can do blocks, 20 megabytes plus pretty consistently. Like the network will route them, the network will mine them. But what we really want to show is 64 megabyte. So we've done one 64 megabyte block in the whole stress test. We've done many 32 megabyte blocks so far, but really they've not been together. We've had one 32 megabyte and then a 20 and a 15 and another 20 and then another 32. We've had a couple of times where we've had 2 or 3 in a row, but what we really want to demonstrate is that we can get consistent performance and deliver big blocks. And so to me, that says 64 megabytes plus consistently, block after block after block. What we're not certain of at the moment is whether the network is ready for that. But so what Esson and I have really been focusing on over the last few days is to try and rebuild the shotgun. So actually, it was quite interesting what happened when we actually went to do the main test on Saturday. When we fired up the shotgun, it was actually what we think happened was that we were way over spec, and we were actually pushing transactions onto the network at rates over 2,000 transactions a second. And so what we saw happening was, it was not that the transactions were being lost or that anything was crashing or anything like that, but that the network just experienced a kind of a slow degradation, and the blocks actually ended up getting smaller over time. And we just ended up stopping our transactions going onto the network. And even for kind of several hours after the 64 megabyte block, we were still seeing, 25 megabytes, 28 megabytes. And that was just all these transactions that we'd pushed onto the network, slowly making their way out to the mining nodes. And so what we want to do now is create a test that starts quite slowly and actually just ramps up. And so we start with kind of an hour of consistent 5 or 10 megabyte blocks, go up to 20, then 30, then 40, then 50. And what we expect to see is at a certain point, the performance of the network will start to go down. And so the blocks that we're mining will hit a certain level, and we'll be pushing more and more transactions into the network, but the block size will actually start to go down as those transactions begin to overwhelm the nodes, and we actually start to exceed the capacity of the network. And so that will actually give us a very good bearing on what is the actual throughput that we can achieve today. And I'm hoping, and Steve can probably chime in on this, but I'm hoping that will actually give us a really good metric of where the bottleneck is. And you know, with all the work that's happening on Bitcoin SV, and we have had a bit of an interface with the team working on SV, and they've been really fantastic in reaching out to us and telling us, giving us feedback on what we're doing to the network. And at times they've gotten in touch with us and said, please stop what you're doing. There's too much activity on the network. You need to stop. And so that's been really fantastic for us to have that level of feedback from people directly monitoring what's happening. So I'm here with Esson. So Esson is really the main architect of the Satoshi shotgun. He's an engineer with, you can introduce yourself.
What I am happy with this tool is that we are able to blast with full speed and produce a lot of 128 block. I am convinced that the tool is able to do this, and we need to have the network able to receive this. And so I am very happy because I did a lot of changes in the blast to have a lot of features like blast both chains at the same time, or blast each one separated. And I am very happy because it can do a lot of things and do many of tests in the network. So we can do a lot of things, and we are planning a lot of tests that will be very good for both chains.
We actually did a bit of maths around what actually happened on Saturday night is we just turned the shotgun on and went full kind of balls out, whatever it could do. And when we actually went back and checked how fast we were pushing transactions onto the network, it was the equivalent of about a 600 to 800 megabyte block every 10 minutes. And so what we realized was actually we really, it was too much. And so what we're working on now is concrete ways to graduate that speed that we're pushing transactions onto the network, so that we can, in a way that's not so brutal, push the performance and really find with a lot more fine grain where the limits are. And so that's really the update on the Satoshi shotgun. What we've set for ourselves now that we're both sitting here at Satoshi Shotgun HQ, the next goal for us is to deliver a kind of a consistent big block run and before CoinGeek. So we want to kind of see, I would say, at least 10, if not 20 in a row, at least 50, if not 64 plus megabyte blocks, and really have something to announce to the world next week. So
what the purpose of this tool is to help the SV chain to go and win the war. We will do everything that's possible for us to help this, to support this. And we have a lot of features that we can change. And we are able to blast with full force, full strong. And I always say that this is, we begin to construct something, and now it's like a beast that can, it's always hungry. And if you feed it, if you blast brute force. So
it's quite amazing.
It's incredible.
You just give it satoshis, and it just blasts transactions. And
it's always hungry.
I always go back to the very first time I tried to stress test the network, and I actually ran a bit of a custom script that sent a heap of low fee transactions onto the network, and I was immediately banned. But I managed to get about 35,000 transactions onto the network. And I reached out to Craig at the time, and I said, "Hey, Craig, we want to do this." And he said, "Go for it. This is what we need." And Craig, I'm assuming that you're still 100% for what we're doing.
Yeah,
we're really trying to demonstrate to the world that the Bitcoin now SV network.
There's only one thing. Only one bit. I want more transactions.
Yeah, we can do. We will do more transactions.
He always wants more. How much is enough, Craig? More. Yeah, no, I really love what you guys are doing too. Actually, the stress tests have some really important impacts on the Bitcoin ecosystem. The first couple of times they were run, a few people kind of panicked a bit and went, "Oh my God, we're not ready for this." That's exactly what the point of the stress test is to make sure people are ready. So if we run a stress test and a few services fall over, if a block explorer fails or whatever, they know they've got a problem that they've got to sort out. We can't afford to have a Bitcoin network that's got services that are going to fall over when there's big blocks. So we'll either knock those services out of existence, or they'll respond and compete and upgrade and make sure they've got their act together. And once the stress test sort of completes that first process of pushing the whole ecosystem to make sure that they can handle the volume, then we're in a really good place. And it puts everybody on notice. If you want to create a new block explorer or a new money button or whatever, I'm not saying that money button couldn't handle it, I'm not sure. Whatever kind of Bitcoin service, you need to make sure that you've engineered it properly to be able to handle big blocks. Because if we have a regularly scheduled stress test or something, so whether it be once a month or once a week or whatever, your service is only going to survive until the next stress test. And that means that we've got an entire ecosystem full of resilient and big block capable tools, and that's what we need.
Yeah, one of the things that we've consistently said since we began. Sorry, there's a mobile phone ringing here. One of the things
hey
that
guys,
I
got a question, if that's all right. It's Sam here.
Yeah.
Brendan.
Sorry.
I'm interested to know about the tech stack.
Because of this.
Okay.
Eston, turn it off, please.
Is the shotgun open source? Is my question.
It currently is not, but and we
also what's it written in?
It's a combination of a few different things. So there's some JavaScript. There's a lot of Bash script. It's Eston is the craftsman here, and he's kind of built this whole thing. I'm not a real expert in how this goes together. But Eston, can you comment on what language you used? We would love to release this as a product that people can use at any time. People can spin up their own shotgun and fire, 10 million transactions.
Can we move it forward? Because I'm going to have to go at 11, and I've got an early morning, and it's already 10 to 11 here.
Thanks, Brendan.
Yep.
Look, I am writing in JavaScript, Node.js, and also with a mix of Bash script. And I think it's not a good tool to be everywhere for everybody because it's dangerous. And Yes, you create something like a monster that sometimes wants to do for itself. It's dangerous, but we are constructing a lot of new features now that will be very good. Like we are, I talked to Brenda, and we are implementing features like the beast will grow as by demand, and we will shrink if there is no demand. And
the idea is that we will be able to scale the transactional throughput to match the network as the network improves.
Yeah, I worked a lot in the past with high availability systems, and so we are constructing this like a thing that will not stop or will scale as needed. So it's very good to blast, but it's not a easy tool. I was beginning today with Brandon to create a user panel, because we don't have. I do as needed during the stress test, and now I ask Brandon to pilot one stress test to see the problems that the user have, and then begin to build the documentation manual and a user guide.
To give you an idea of just how complicated the machine is, like we have one master node which is currently and doesn't need to stay this way, but we have one master machine which is a Bitcoin Unlimited node with a 64 core machine with about 280 gigabytes of RAM, and it handles the generation of all of the transactions. So we feed it funds, and it creates large batches of transactions, so about 25,000 transactions per batch. These batches are then handed off to a queue where, so then outside of that, we have another array of, currently I think so when we were just blasting stuff just crazy, like way more than the network could handle, we had about, I think about 80 nodes in the system. And so each node, this is a big, like a Google cluster.
Hey, Brendan, hey, real quick, can we like,
I have to go in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Let's say this very, very quickly. 100 nodes, everyone each connected with each other. Look this, and one choose the other to blast the things, and we have a regulate to see to say how many bytes will be per second in transactions per second in each node.
Yeah, it's a very scalable, very controllable system. So, we're looking forward to seeing where it can go. But anyway, let's move on.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you. Craig, you can talk about whatever you want. If anyone has questions, you can fire them at them. I will just say anecdotally, things are looking pretty good for you guys right now.
Yeah, as I've been saying, it's just a long game. People have got to realize that the market is not exchanges. Exchanges are not the market ever, by definition. A market is a producer and a consumer. Exchanges can help find a price point for a market. They are not a market. They don't define markets. They don't do anything to markets. And if there's no market, they just shit things up. They're a casino. So the reality of all this is, if they're doing anything other than on-ramping people between fiat and one crypto, they're a shit. They're a lump of fucking festering dog shit that stinks. Most of them are criminal. Actually, I haven't met one that's not. They get away with it at the moment because the average time for a new technology to be taken down, ripped apart cheek-wise and rammed up the arse is about 6 to 8 years. But luckily, Bitcoin and blockchain enables years worth of evidence not to be lost. So all these things and whatever, like the 90s, Wolf of Wall Street was about the same scenario we have now. It was about digital pink sheets. Except a lot of people got away with that shit because the evidence went through shredders and deleted hard drives and everything else. It was too hard to find. Now, 20 years later, they can track you down and go, you did this fucking shit. Bye-bye. That's what Bitcoin's about. Not anti-law. It is the ultimate fuck you 20 years down the track thing. It is the ultimate, if you do something in an ICO, we're going to track down your kids in school and get them to fucking find where you are so that we can actually know everything about you. Bitcoin works privately. Privately means traceable. Anonymous doesn't work. Anonymous will never be allowed. Anonymous is never going to be on this freaking earth because there is no such bloody thing as anonymous. This is the real world, people. The real world works because we want to engage with other people. And to engage with other people, we need to know about those people. We have to trust the people. So we take the trust out of the monetary exchange. That's what Bitcoin does. Knowing that the money will be there and be paid, that we can put it in an escrow contract, that we can do other things. It doesn't say that we have this trustless ICO world because no one wants that. No one wants to chuck money at some stupid bloody 19-year-old developer who wants to go and smoke pot. That's the world. They want real development. Silicon Valley is a load of fucking shit. Bigger stinking shit. It's not dog shit, it's fucking dinosaur shit. The software is not eating the fucking world. Forget that shit. It is not. For every software has actually shrunk in comparison to the reality of manufacturing. The idea that manufacturing has left the US for China does not get rid of manufacturing. We manufacture way more than we ever did. Our capital resources, our capital goods are something like 110 times what they were when most of the people in this industry were born. So, like you, Connor, you've grown up and everything is about 100 times bigger. Capital industry, everything like that. We have not gotten rid of everything. This whole idea of all this, our desks are empty. No, they're not. Furniture has not disappeared. Drinks have not disappeared. Food has not disappeared. Airplanes have not disappeared. Cars have not disappeared. Software has added efficiency. It doesn't get rid of anything. In fact, it makes more. We have more paper being printed. Every person on earth prints more paper than when I was a kid. Thousands of times more. Not a little bit, shitloads more.
So much for the paperless office.
I know. The more you try and do, the more they do. So the thing you've got to think is not, how do we make this freaking wet dream of a sort of soy boy utopia, because it's never going to happen. We are never going to have a communist, techno-communist world where everyone's bloody equal, because the only way you have equal is you nobble someone on the knees so they can't run as fast. Welcome to the real world. And no one gets to start evenly because it's about family. It's about not that guy over there. It's about the people you care about in your life. And very simply, you want to leave things to your kids. People want inheritance. They don't want it going away. We want to put our kids in better schools. We don't want everyone being equal. The reality is the average person, the person who votes for fucking Donald Trump, doesn't give a fucking shit about all of this crap. It is a wet dream from 1% of 1% of the population. And like it or not, the other 99.999 or so percent of the population wants property rights. They vote for this shit. They want all this other stuff. They want simplicity. They want everything delivered into their door. They want growth. They want everything else here. They want to go shopping and know what they're getting. That's the real world, and that's what we're going to build. There you go, rant for the night.
Amen.
Exciting rant.
Any quick questions for Craig? Craig, I know you said you had to go.
Yeah, I'll take some questions first, though.
Anyone have some questions?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it, Kurt.
What can regular people be doing? I run a community of about 70,000 people on social media. I teach them fundamentals on how to, protect their keys and do basic stuff, basic trading, basically how to avoid ICOs, all that kind of stuff. But what can average people do? I have a lot of SV supporters on my side, but everybody's like, hey, do we want to be part of a social media campaign, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of don't know what to tell them at this point.
Stop the hoodle mentality. Stop, buy Bitcoin and hold and wait. Tell people to think about how they could get it used. Don't care about have you got Bitcoin to stick in your wallet. Care more about going to a place and saying, do you take Bitcoin?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll get turned down 99 out of 100 times. And I offered, the stupidest one was a dinner with actually a whole bunch of people, God knows, a little while back now, but Tone Bays was actually there. And I offered to pay, at one stage, the whole meal in Bitcoin. And the total that I would have paid them if they took it in Bitcoin ended up like $10,000. And I still couldn't get them to take bloody Bitcoin. So if you can get people to understand to take Bitcoin, wonderful.
Glad to hear it.
To understand, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had an app that would allow us to pay you like hand cash, but splitting the bill?
Mm-hmm.
Little things like that.
That's a long-term a message that we really do need to get out there. But in the short term, if you have people that are willing to kind of spread a message, and I say this to everyone in this meeting because I assume that most of you are here because you are supporters of the roadmap that ST is advocating for. The message that we need to get out in the short term is that ABC abandoning Nakamoto consensus because with their 10 block reorg protection change that they brought out yesterday, they've quite literally abandoned Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin anymore because
worse than that, they've actually made the whole reason for Bitcoin's disappeared in the way that you now have a central authority that only controls the code. Any other copies other than ABC, so BU, whatever else, have to follow this one consensus rule, which at the end of it makes a central target an issuer. So ABC are now effectively tied to an issuance and they can be grabbed. They have actually made themselves legally liable to just be taken away and the protocol controlled. Thank you.
Yeah. This is it. I mean, Armour is openly advocating for taking the power away from miners, and that is exactly what makes Bitcoin. And that's a message that needs to be understood by the wider community, and we can put that message out there, obviously, but the more people that are helping to present that message, the better. The other thing that I would say is RBTC has turned into everything that Roger has preached about for the last few years. They're starting to engage in censorship, etc. If you look at, spend a little bit of time looking through Twitter and then spend a little bit of time looking through RBTC, you'll see a vast difference in the tone and the narrative. We need to encourage people to start moving away from RBTC. I would recommend that you try and push people into our Bitcoin SV. That's a friendly subreddit, and we have no intention of engaging in any kind of censorship. But that's probably a good place for discussions to move to, so that we can actually have some real discussions without all the shit that's is flying around in vast volumes on RBTC.
Does anyone in the real world actually look at Reddit?
Roger does.
I said the real world.
I found it really interesting in one of his videos that he's put out in the last week, and he's been churning them out like once or twice a day. But he actually said straight to the camera, come to RBTC for some uncensored discussion on Bitcoin. And if you listen to it carefully, you can actually hear him choking the words out. Like you can actually hear when he realizes in his head that he's talking bullshit, and he has to force it out. I thought that was really quite interesting. It just shows how much he knows about what he's actually.
Well, I think
guys, if anyone feels the need for any encouragement, I dropped the link a bit earlier in the chat, but I've just dropped it again. There's a new services page has just come up on the Bitcoin SV website, which lists a lot of the services that have committed to migrating onto the Bitcoin SV blockchain, and most of those are exclusively going to be supporting Bitcoin SV. So have a look at that site, because I saw it today, and I knew we had some significant support, but seeing it there on the page really made me.
It's impressive. Thank you, guys. I'm going to head off, and I'll catch you later.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Greg.
Great to see you.
Catch you.
Thanks, Craig.
To everyone else, I stopped recording, but if anyone wants to hang around and talk, we got plenty of time.
Yeah, let's chat.
I have a couple more sort of technical questions. I know who's supporting what.